I refuse to poison myself with his cooking. Ashley's voice echoed through the quiet dining room, slicing the air with a cruelty that made people shift uncomfortably in their seats. Ryan stood behind the counter, stunned, the dish he had crafted with years of skill and love still warm in his hands. Cooking wasn't just work for him, it was the way he honored his mother's lessons, the way he gave back to his community, the way he expressed every piece of who he was. Hearing someone tear it down so loudly, so carelessly, felt like watching a part of himself shatter in front of everyone. What Ryan didn't know was that her outburst would trigger a chain of events bigger than either of them could imagine, covering secrets, exposing harmful patterns, and forcing both their lives down a path filled with truth, accountability, and unexpected redemption. A single moment of humiliation would transform everything that came after. But before we dive into the full story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story truly began. The dining room of the Vine Collective glowed with a soft amber warmth, the kind that made even an empty restaurant feel like it had a heartbeat. On this slow Tuesday night, only 3 tables were occupied. 2 couples, murmuring quietly over wine flights, and an elderly man writing in a leather notebook. Their low conversations mixed with the faint hum of jazz drifting from the overhead speakers. Outside, Napa's evening fog rolled lazily across the windows, blurring the world beyond into a watercolor haze. Behind the open kitchen's marble counter, Ryan James moved with the quiet focus of someone who had spent more hours in a kitchen than out of one. Everything about him radiated composed intention, the slow exhale before he placed each skillop, the careful swirl of truffle foam, the tiny adjustments he made with a pair of tweezers so the dish looked like it belonged in a gallery, not a modest community restaurant. At 36, he carried the presence of a man who knew exactly who he was, and yet tried his hardest not to make anyone else feel that way. His broad shoulders were softened by a warm smile, and his deep-set eyes held a gentleness that contrasted with the sharp precision of his craft. Tonight, though, the restaurant felt too quiet, too still, too dependent on hope that seemed to come and go like the breeze outside. He stepped back to evaluate the plate beneath the soft kitchen lights. "Beautiful," he murmured, barely loud enough for himself. Moments like this were usually grounding. Tonight, they reminded him of how fragile new beginnings could be. The front door suddenly swung open with a bright chime, slicing the room's calm in half. Ashley Wentworth swept inside like a gust of designer perfume head two-toe luxury, every piece of her outfit chosen for its ability to announce importance. Blonde hair perfectly waved, oversized sunglasses shielding half her face despite the low indoor lighting, and a smile that wasn't really a smile, more like a silent declaration that she belonged everywhere she stepped. Her phone was already raised. Going live, she whispered to herself, tapping the screen. Her voice instantly shifted into its influencer cadence, high and performative. "Hey guys, I'm at Napa's newest hotspot tonight," she said, making air quotes at her viewers. "Let's see if it lives up to the hype." The word hype echoed awkwardly in the nearly empty room. Ryan approached her with the same warm smile he'd given every guest that night. "Good evening. Welcome to the Vine Collective. We're offering a tasting menu tonight. Seasonal local ingredients. I'd be happy to walk you through it." Ashley lowered her phone slightly and looked him over slowly, deliberately before raising her eyebrows. She didn't bother lowering her voice. "I'm not poisoning myself with his food." Her finger flicked toward him casually, like swatting away a fly. "Can someone qualified cook for us?" The entire room went silent. Even the jazz seemed to fade. Ryan's smile held steady, but something in his posture shifted, shoulders drawing subtly inward, breath tightening. Not anger. Something quieter. Something people didn't talk about enough. "I am the chef," he said softly. "And the owner, ma'am." Ashley blinked once, then threw her head back and laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that scraped the air. "You?" she said loudly, still streaming live. You own this place? No wonder it's dead in here. A couple at the corner table exchanged uncomfortable glances. The elderly man paused mid-sentence in his notebook. Ashley didn't care. She was already turning toward the door, still holding her phone out in front of her. Hard avoid, everyone. Unqualified staff. You've been warned, she declared to her viewers, her voice coated in smug self-assurance. The moment the door closed, the room felt smaller, tighter, like all the oxygen had followed her out. Ryan stood still for several seconds, letting her words settle like ash in the air. He inhaled slowly, carefully, setting each emotion back into its drawer, one by one. Hurt, embarrassment, unwelcome familiarity. Maria, his sous chef, peeked from behind the prep counter. Hey, she whispered gently. That woman humiliates people for a living. Everyone in the industry knows Ashley Wentworth. You didn't do anything wrong. Ryan nodded once but didn't speak. Words felt heavy. So he turned back to the cutting board, hands moving automatically, as if chopping herbs could silence the echo of her laughter. Tommy, the youngest server, eager but sensitive, approached quietly. His hands shook a little as he held out his phone. Chef, I recorded what happened. Just in case, we could end her with this. People need to see the truth. Ryan looked at the screen but didn't hit play. No, he said softly. We don't fight hate with more hate. We fight it with excellence. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't pride. It was the voice of someone who had climbed mountains too tall to be shaken by one influencer's cruelty, but still felt the sting of every step. The restaurant emptied out slowly after that. By midnight, only Ryan remained, standing alone in the quiet kitchen, with his apron tossed aside and his head resting in his hands. The exhaustion wasn't physical, was the kind that came from being misunderstood, underestimated, or dismissed before you even opened your mouth. At 2 a.m., he was still cooking, reworking dishes, retasting broths, adjusting seasoning, searching for something he couldn't name. By 4 a.m., he finally stopped, though the ache in his chest didn't. He locked up, unaware that by morning, Ashley's live stream would explode across the internet, except not the way she expected. The comments weren't mocking Ryan. They were defending him. And buried deep in the replies, a cryptic message appeared. Wait till she finds out who he really is. Ryan slept through all of it. The world, however, did not. The kitchen had never felt so hollow. Long after the last dish had been washed and every counter had been wiped to a shine, the silence pressed in around Ryan like something alive. The overhead lights hummed quietly, reflecting off stainless steel surfaces that on most nights carried a reassuring warmth. Tonight, they seemed cold, impersonal, too bright for the heaviness in his chest. Ryan sat at the prep table, elbows resting on his knees, head buried in his hands. The fabric of his chef coat was still faintly damp near the collar, clinging to him as though it had absorbed the weight of the night. He tried to breathe, but every inhale trembled just enough to betray him. Footsteps approached, soft, careful, almost hesitant. Maria stood a few feet away, still in her apron, dark curls pulled into a frizzy bun she hadn't noticed loosening. Her eyes were red from long hours, but filled with the kind of protective anger only a loyal friend could carry. "Chef," she whispered, not wanting to startle him. "Hey, look at me for a second." He didn't move at first. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were tired, but steady, always steady, even when the world wasn't. "She's infamous for this," Maria said softly, crouching down so she could look him directly in the face. "Everyone in the industry knows Ashley Wentworth. Restaurants dread getting on her radar. Most chefs are terrified of her." Ryan let out a slow breath through his nose. "I'm not terrified," he murmured, "just tired." Maria reached out and squeezed his forearm gently. "What she did wasn't about you. People like her. They feed off humiliation. You didn't deserve it." He didn't argue. He didn't have the strength to. Instead, he let the silence fill the cracks between them. The kitchen smelled faintly of citrus, rosemary, and something deeper, something warm and familiar, the scent of a place built on passion, not fame. But fame lingered at the edges of his thoughts anyway, unwelcome but persistent. The Sterling. The name alone carried weight, reverence, a kind of gravity that came from decades of dedication and 3 shimmering Michelin stars. His flagship restaurant in San Francisco, the one newspapers called a cathedral for food, the one tourists waited months to book, the one critics traveled across oceans to experience. And yet he never mentioned it here, not in Napa, not in the community where he'd grown up scraping pennies to buy groceries, not in the soft corner of California where he wanted people to feel seen, welcomed, honored. The Vine Collective existed for his hometown, not for prestige, and certainly not for ego. He rubbed the back of his neck. "If she knew who I was," he said quietly, "maybe she wouldn't have said what she said." Maria frowned. "No, she would have pretended to love you. That's worse." He managed a weak smile, one that faded quickly. More footsteps echoed down the hallway. Tommy entered slowly, clutching his phone with both hands. He was young, barely 21, with a kind of earnestness that made him seem even younger. His voice shook whenever he wasn't sure of himself, which was often. "Chef, can I show you something?" Ryan nodded. Tommy hesitated, then pressed play. The screen illuminated his face, reflecting the shaky footage he had secretly recorded. Ashley's condescending tone, her derisive laugh, the pointed words that cut sharper than any knife in the kitchen. When the video ended, Tommy swallowed hard. "We could end her with this," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "Seriously. She's lost partnerships before for stuff like this. We posted. She won't recover this time." Ryan watched the blank screen for a moment before shaking his head. "No." Tommy blinked. "But we don't fight hate with more hate," Ryan said softly, the line delivered with the calm surety of someone who had lived the truth of it. "We fight it with excellence." Tommy's shoulders slumped, not in disappointment, but in awe. "You're a better man than most." Ryan didn't respond. He wasn't sure he deserved the praise. After Tommy and Maria finally went home, exhaustion tugging at their steps, Ryan stayed behind. He always stayed behind. But tonight, the kitchen didn't feel like a sanctuary, it felt like a confession booth. He cooked until 4 a.m., pushing through fatigue, slicing through doubt one dish at a time. He adjusted sauces until they sang, revised plating until it looked like poetry. Every movement was slow, intentional, almost meditative. The kind of work that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with food in the first place. When he finally left, the sun was still hiding behind the hills, and the air outside tasted like cold dew and unfinished dreams. By mid-morning, everything had changed. Ashley's scathing video review had gone viral, just as she hoped, but the outcome was not what she expected. Comment after comment poured in, not attacking Ryan, but defending him fiercely. Why was she so rude? He handled that with so much grace. She embarrassed herself, not him. Who talks to a chef like that? And then, threaded through the chaos, appeared a series of cryptic hints. "Wait till she finds out who he really is. Girl, you messed with the wrong chef. She has no idea whose kitchen she walked into." The internet hummed with speculation. Meanwhile, miles away in her luxury apartment, Ashley paced with nervous energy while her assistant, Lila, typed furiously on a laptop. Lila suddenly gasped. "Oh, Ashley, you're going to love this." Her fingers trembled with excitement. The Sterling in San Francisco finally agreed to a meeting next Thursday. Ashley froze mid-step. "The Sterling? Are you serious?" "The Sterling?" Lila nodded enthusiastically. "Their business office reached out this morning. They said they've been watching your numbers climb and think you'd be a great fit for a Bay Area collaboration. They're even suggesting a feature on their tasting experience with you as the guest influencer. Ashley's breath caught, her earlier humiliation forgotten in an instant. This could change everything. Lila smiled. I told you, your influence is finally paying off. Not once did either of them think to Google the owner. After all, why would they? The Sterling had contacted them, and when a brand that prestigious reached out, you didn't question it, you celebrated. The transformation happened almost overnight. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the quiet, unassuming dining room of the Vine Collective, usually a sanctuary of soft murmurs and gentle clinks, felt charged with something new, something electric. The kind of energy that comes when curiosity takes hold of a community and begins to gather momentum. Ryan noticed it first when he stepped onto the restaurant floor and found a line forming outside the windows. People peered in with hopeful eyes, whispering to one another, some pointing shyly at the open kitchen where he stood polishing a row of knives. Their faces carried a mixture of admiration and protective loyalty, the way hometown crowds often rally around one of their own. When the doors opened, the reservation screen began blinking non-stop. Tables vanished from availability faster than servers could update the system. By noon, they had tripled their usual bookings for the entire week. Walk-ins pleaded gently at the host stand, hands clasped, asking if there might, just maybe a forgotten two-top somewhere. Ryan stood back and watched, stunned. The surge wasn't chaotic. It was reverent, almost tender. People were not there for spectacle. They were there out of solidarity, out of affection for the chefs they'd seen treated unfairly. The wave felt less like opportunity and more like a community lifting him by the shoulders. Maria nudged him as she passed with a tray. Your fans have arrived, she teased, though her eyes softened with pride. He shook his head. They're not fans, they're neighbors. The Hendersons arrived just before the dinner rush, a couple in their late 60s who always held hands when they walked in. Their steps slow, but perfectly in sync. They'd been regulars from the very beginning. The kind of customers who never complained, who wrote handwritten thank you notes on the backs of receipts, who always asked about the staff's families as though they were their own. Tonight, they looked around at the bustling room with a mix of joy and nostalgia. Oh my, Mrs. Henderson whispered. Your place is famous now, isn't it? Let's hope not, Ryan chuckled. Fame complicates things. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. You know, we've eaten at your other place in the city. Her eyes sparkled with a secret kindness. And this, she motioned to the plate Maria had just set down, is every bit as brilliant. Heat crept up the back of Ryan's neck. Compliments never sat comfortably with him, especially ones spoken with so much sincerity. He placed a hand gently on the table, meeting her gaze. Please, he murmured. Let this restaurant stand on its own legs. Don't mention the other one to anyone. Not yet. Her smile was warm, understanding. Your secret is safe with us. Her husband squeezed her hand, nodding at Ryan with a look that held the weight of unspoken respect. The night flowed in a glow of clinking glasses, soft laughter, and the kind of soulful dining that reminded Ryan why he opened the Vine Collective in the first place. Not for noise, not for headlines, but for connection. For the small moments when a dish made someone's eyes soften or brought back a memory they didn't expect. But outside the restaurant, the world was spinning in a very different direction. On social media, Ashley Wentworth had returned to her usual glossy self. Her stories were filled with curated angles, expensive lighting, and the confident tone she used when she believed she was winning. Biggest deal of my career next week, she announced to her followers, lips glossed, hair perfectly set. Dining with Bay Area royalty. Her smile was smug, almost triumphant, as though the universe had rearranged itself to reward her. Her followers flooded the comments with congratulations, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her curated exterior. She didn't mention the Napa incident, She didn't have to. She believed the future was hers. Meanwhile, in a quiet office above the Sterling, Ryan's business manager, Elena, sifted through a stack of requests. She was a sharp woman in her 40s, with glasses that often slid down the bridge of her nose, and a voice that always sounded like she was 2 seconds from sighing. She took her job seriously, sometimes more seriously than Ryan did. When she reached the influencer collaboration request, she paused. Ashley Wentworth. The name meant nothing to her personally, but the metrics attached to the file nearly jumped off the page. Massive following, high engagement, viral visibility. It was the kind of proposal that marketing teams loved, the kind that could boost visibility, reinforce branding, and bring new eyes to both the Sterling and its smaller sister restaurant in Napa. She forwarded the message with a short note. Some influencer named Ashley Wentworth. Her numbers are huge. Could be great exposure for both locations. Let me know if you want to approve the meeting. Ryan received the email late in the evening while leaning against his office doorframe, still in his apron, hair tied back loosely. The air smelled of roasted garlic and simmered stock, remnants of a long but fulfilling night. He skimmed the message without any recognition. He didn't know the name. Didn't connect it to the woman who had ridiculed him days earlier. Didn't imagine, even for a moment, that the universe was preparing one of its sharpest twists. He typed a simple response. Everyone deserves a fair shot. Go ahead and schedule it. He hit send without fanfare, without suspicion, without the faintest clue that the person he was about to sit across from, the woman his flagship restaurant had agreed to host, was the same woman who had humiliated him publicly. The tide was rising for both of them, but only one understood the currents. Thursday arrived with the kind of quiet intensity that settles over a city just before something shifts. San Francisco's evening fog curled around the glass towers, softening the world into muted silver. In the heart of the city, the Sterling glowed like a jewel-warm, golden, impossibly elegant. It was the kind of restaurant people whispered about before they ever walked through its doors. Ashley stepped out of the black car with the self-assured grace she practiced daily for her audience. Her heels clicked against the marble entrance as the host opened the door and welcomed her by name. Yet even in her confidence, there was a tension beneath her polished surface, an eagerness to impress the legendary establishment that, for reasons she didn't question, had reached out to her. Inside, the Sterling was breathtaking. Light from the chandeliers shimmered across crystal glassware. 1,000 bottles of wine rested inside the soaring glass wall, each illuminated as though floating. Tables were draped in linen so fine it looked like poured cream. Everything felt intentional, orchestrated, like a symphony unfolding one note at a time. Ashley walked slowly, almost reverently, taking in the ambiance she hoped would elevate her brand to the next level. She smoothed a hand down her blazer, checked her reflection in a mirrored pillar, and lifted her chin. She was ready to impress, ready to belong. A maitre d' approached with perfect posture and a voice like velvet. "Miss Wentworth, welcome to the Sterling. Please follow me." He led her past diners engrossed in hushed conversations, past servers who moved like choreographic, silent, precise, almost invisible. Ashley felt a flutter of pride. This was what she deserved. This was her world now. But when the maître d' turned down a quiet hallway leading to the private dining suites, her steps slowed. "The owner will meet you shortly," he said as he opened the last door on the left. The private dining room was stunning in its restraint. A single round table draped in ivory linen, 2 place settings of bone-white porcelain edged with platinum, a centerpiece of white orchids floating in a glass bowl. Soft wall sconces cast gentle shadows that made the room feel intimate and impossibly exclusive. Ashley took a seat, smoothing her skirt again. She checked her phone even though she knew she shouldn't. Her hands trembled just enough for her to notice. "This is huge," she whispered to herself, practicing the moment she would later recount online, carefully curated, undoubtedly viral. Then the handle turned. The door opened, and Ryan walked in. Ashley's entire body went rigid. He wore a midnight blue suit that seemed to shape itself around him effortlessly, elegance made tangible. Draped over his arm was a pristine chef's coat, crisp, white, embroidered subtly in silver. His posture was poised, the quiet confidence of someone who lived comfortably in his accomplishments. But his expression, that was what unsettled her most. Calm, controlled, not angry, not smug, simply resolute. Her breath caught. Color drained from her face so quickly it felt like falling. Ryan inclined his head slightly. "Good evening, Miss Wentworth. Funny seeing you here." His voice was steady, warm in tone, but carrying the unmistakable weight of truth. Ashley's lips parted, but no sound came out. She blinked rapidly as though trying to erase him and replace him with someone else. "There must be a mistake," she finally managed, her voice brittle. "Where's the real owner?" Ryan pulled out his chair with a soft scrape and took his seat across from her. He set the chef's coat over the back of his chair, folded neatly, almost ceremonially. "There is no mistake," he replied, hands resting loosely on the table. "I own the Sterling. Just like I own the restaurant you reviewed last week." The room tilted. Ashley felt it, physically. Her stomach tightened so sharply she had to grip the edge of the table. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That can't be. You were cooking there. You were just a chef," she almost said. Just someone beneath her career tier. But the words refused to leave her mouth. Ryan reached into the leather folder beside him and slid the latest Michelin guide across the table. It stopped directly in front of her. Ashley stared at the cover for a long moment before opening it with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the pages until she reached the one marked with a silver tab. There he was, Ryan James, captured mid-service in a dramatic photograph, framed by flames leaping from a pan. The caption beneath it declared him a 3-star Michelin chef, youngest black chef ever to receive that honor. Her breath fractured in her chest. She flipped through the pages, awards, reviews, headlines, profiles. James Beard winner, Culinary Innovator of the Year, feature in international magazines. Interviews praising his discipline, his artistic restraint, his refusal to compromise on integrity. Each fact landed like a stone. Ryan watched her quietly, not out of cruelty, but with an expression that carried something weightier. Perhaps disappointment, perhaps understanding, perhaps something more complicated. He finally spoke, his voice measured. "I keep my name off the Napa location on purpose. I wanted it to live or die by the food, not by reputation." The softness in his tone hit her harder than anger ever could have. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't trying to humiliate her. He was simply telling the truth. Ashley's throat tightened painfully. A different kind of realization crept over her, slow and suffocating. The humiliation she had inflicted on him, the way she had dismissed him, the cruelty she had justified as honesty for her viewers. All of it now lay bare under the glow of his achievements. And he wasn't throwing it in her face. He wasn't attacking her. That made the guilt sharper. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know who you were." Ryan leaned back slightly, studying her. "And that," he said gently, "is the part that matters least." Ashley's eyes lifted to his, wide and uncertain. Ryan exhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes when they've been holding their pain quietly for far too long. "The question isn't who I am," he said. "It's who you chose to be when you thought I was nobody." The silence that followed wrapped around them like a mirror neither could escape. Ryan let the silence take its natural shape, unhurried and steady, as if he were giving Ashley room to breathe in the truth settling between them. The private dining room warm light reflecting off polished mahogany, the faint scent of citrus wood polish lingering in the air, felt too elegant for the confrontation unfolding. Still, it was the only place where the conversation could happen with honesty. where he could face her without anger and without the noise of the viral storm that had swallowed both of their lives over the past week. Ashley sat stiffly, hands folded over each other, knuckles pale from the pressure. She kept avoiding his gaze, as if looking at him meant acknowledging everything she had done, every careless word, every self-assured insult recorded and replayed across the internet. Ryan watched her with a quiet stillness that wasn't cold, but undeniably firm. There was something deeply human in the way he breathed through his emotions, refusing to turn this meeting into a weapon. After all, revenge had never been his language. Food had always been his truth. Excellence, his vocabulary. Integrity, his anchor. When the door opened, Ashley startled, almost rising from her seat. It was Maria, hair pulled back, kitchen whites immaculate, eyes sharper than usual. She held a single plate in her hands, her movements respectful, but also undeniably symbolic. A kind of ceremony. A statement without theatrics. She approached the table and set the dish directly in front of Ashley. The scallops, the truffle foam, the delicate herbs arranged like quiet brushstrokes of intention. Exactly the dish Ashley had humiliated him over. Ryan didn't look at the plate right away. He watched Ashley instead, studying the shift in her expression, the tightening of her throat, the way her shoulders stiffened, the faint tremor in her fingers. She wasn't in influencer mode. She wasn't performing. She was simply a person cornered by her own choices. "Do you remember this?" Ryan asked gently. The softness of his tone made it worse. If he'd yelled, she might have found something to push against, but his calm dissolved every excuse forming on her tongue. "It's the same," she managed, her voice thin. "Exactly the same," Ryan said. "The same dish you dismissed before the fork even touched your hand. The same plate you labeled poison without tasting it. The dish you said was made by someone who didn't know what real fine dining meant." Maria crossed her arms just slightly, just enough to communicate how she still felt. But she said nothing. Ryan had asked her for composure. She was giving him that much. Ashley swallowed hard, shifting her chair a little closer to the table. The plate seemed to glow under the chandelier, as though illuminated by the weight of everything that had happened. She reached for the fork, but hesitated, her breath catching shallowly. She looked almost afraid. Ryan noticed. And even now, even after everything, something in him softened. "You can take your time," he said quietly. "This isn't a punishment, it's clarity." The words broke her. Not visibly, not in a dramatic way, but in the subtle collapse of her defenses. Her eyes glistened. Her jaw loosened. Her breathing became more uneven, as if she were fighting back something she hadn't expected to feel at all: remorse. She cut into the scallop. Steam curled upward, carrying the fragrance of butter and truffle, and the faint char that gave each bite its depth. She brought the fork to her lips with a hesitation that bordered on reverence. The moment the food touched her tongue, her expression transformed. There it was, astonishment, pure and unfiltered. Her eyelids fluttered, not in exaggeration, but in shock at how wrong she had been. The texture was tender, precise. The balance of flavors hit exactly where it needed to. It was unmistakably the work of someone who respected ingredients like living things. Her breath trembled when she spoke. Her voice cracked, and she blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. "It's extraordinary." Maria exhaled slowly, her jaw unclenching. A small victory. Ryan nodded once, acknowledging her reaction without triumph. He didn't lean back in arrogance or smile in satisfaction. He simply observed the truth take shape between them. "That," he said softly, "is what you refused before you ever took a bite." Ashley's throat tightened again. This time, she didn't look away. She forced herself to meet his eyes, her expression painfully open, the layers of image and persona stripped away by the undeniable reality of what she had just tasted. "I shouldn't have said what I said," she whispered. I shouldn't have behaved the way I did. Ryan didn't rush to respond. He let her sit in that admission. Because it wasn't easy for someone like her, someone who had built an entire public identity on certainty, on being the judge rather than the judge. You hurt my team, he said finally, more than you know. Tommy, who recorded the incident, he was shaking afterward. Maria went home questioning her work, and I spent a night wondering whether opening the Vine Collective was a mistake. Wondering if bringing fine food back to my hometown was naive. Ashley pressed a hand to her mouth, tears threatening again. Shame wasn't new to her, but being seen in her shame was. I'm sorry, she said, and even she looked surprised by how fragile the apology sounded. Ryan didn't accept it or reject it. He simply nodded, signaling that the words had been heard. Not forgiven, not yet, but heard. He leaned back slightly, his posture composed. This isn't about humiliating you, he continued. It's not about revenge or power or turning the internet against you. I don't need any of that. What I needed was for you to see the truth. Not for my ego. He tapped the table gently, but because you can't keep doing to other chefs what you did to me. And I'm not sure anyone else has ever stopped you long enough to make you face it. Ashley's breath stuttered, a soft, broken sound. The realization landed with unbearable weight. This wasn't just about one review. It was about a pattern she'd been allowed to continue because no one had ever put a mirror this close. I understand, she whispered. Ryan pushed his chair back slowly. This, he said, nodding toward the scallop dish, was never the problem. The problem was not tasting it. She lowered her eyes, voice barely audible. I know. Maria stepped back toward the door, giving Ryan a silent look, respect, solidarity, and cautious hope, all interwoven. Ryan stood, gathering the chef coat draped over the spare chair. We're not done, he said gently, but this was the first step. Ashley nodded, tears slipping down her cheek despite her attempt to hold them back. She didn't wipe them quickly or try to pretend they weren't there. She just let them fall quiet, honest, unfiltered. For the first time since he'd met her, Ryan saw her as something other than the persona the world consumed. Not a villain, right? Not an antagonist, but a person who had finally tasted the truth and felt it. The private dining room had settled into a quiet stillness after Ashley's trembling apology, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, unsure of what shape the night would take next. A few moments earlier, the dish she once mocked had forced her to confront something raw and deeply human in herself. But the room was not done with her. Not yet. There were truths still waiting to be spoken, and they carried a weight she could not soften with excuses or tears. The soft knock at the door drew Ryan's attention. He straightened slightly, the subtle shift in his posture signaling the arrival of something he had been preparing for days. Ashley felt the air change, too quietly to define, but unmistakably. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek, then forced her shoulders to square, as if bracing herself for another wave she already feared she couldn't survive. Elena stepped in first. Her heels made a single sharp click against the hardwood floor before she paused at Ryan's side. In her hands was a thick folder, overstuffed, edges curling from the strain, the kind of folder that held more than paperwork. It held history, choices, patterns, consequences. Ashley's gaze snagged on it immediately. Elena, Ryan said, his voice carefully measured. Thank you for coming. Elena nodded once, offering the faintest, most sympathetic glance toward Ashley. Not cruel, not mocking. Just the look of someone who already knew the truth and had no desire to dress it up. What is that? Ashley asked, her voice cracking on the last word, despite her attempt to steady it. Elena placed the folder on the table. It landed with a soft but heavy thud, one that seemed to echo inside Ashley's chest. Ryan rested his fingertips on the cover, the gesture gentle but resolute. This, he said quietly, is the part you didn't expect tonight. Ashley swallowed hard, palms beginning to sweat. Her heartbeat flickered painfully against her ribs. She suddenly felt exposed in a way far more terrifying than being called out online. This wasn't the internet. This wasn't anonymous comments or strangers forming opinions. This was real people, face to face, and she could feel something breaking open inside her. Alina opened the folder. Inside were documents, printed screenshots, emails, contracts highlighted in thick red ink, messages to her assistant, and detailed timelines that mapped out a familiar pattern, a pattern she had spent her whole career pretending wasn't one. Ashley's breath caught. "No," she whispered without conviction. "This isn't." Those deals were business. They were opportunities. Those restaurants needed. The words died. This time, she didn't even try to retrieve them. Ryan slid one packet forward. 18 months ago, Oakland, Soul Food Restaurant. Owner, Marcus Green. Ashley's stomach twisted. The name sparked something in her memory. An argument, a headline, a video she had pretended not to see. Alina continued, her tone calm but unwavering. "You posted a scathing review of his restaurant. Your video was shared over 2 million times. 2 weeks later, you offered him a collaboration contract where 78% of profits went to you." Ashley felt her throat close. "That deal," Ryan said quietly, "almost put him out of business." The door behind them opened again. A man stepped in tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded denim apron that looked both humble and proud. "Marcus." He paused at the threshold, watching Ashley with an expression she couldn't decipher. Not anger, not pity, just the quiet stare of someone who had survived something he hadn't deserved. Ashley's breath faltered. "Marcus, I didn't mean to," but he lifted a hand gently, stopping her. "Don't explain yet," he said softly. "Not until you've heard everything." Before Ashley could process that, Alina lifted another packet from the folder. San Jose, Asian Fusion. Owner, Yuki Tanaka. Another door opened. A petite woman with a poised, almost delicate presence entered, her dark hair pulled back in a neat twist, her eyes far older than her youthful face. She carried a quiet strength with her, the kind forged by necessity, not choice. When her gaze landed on Ashley, something flickered recognition mixed with hurt, but also an exhaustion that made Ashley's chest ache. "I remember you," Yuki said softly. "I remember thinking your review would destroy me. And it almost did." Ashley couldn't hold her gaze. Her eyes dropped to her lap, shame burning hot against her cheeks. And then, Elena said, setting down the final packet, Barkley. Modern Mexican. Owner, Camila Reyes. Ashley flinched at the name before the door even opened. Camila stepped inside with a presence that filled the room, strong, bold, unapologetically herself. Her dark curls framed her face like a halo of fire. She looked directly at Ashley, not with rage, but with the heartbreaking clarity of someone who had once believed in fairness and learned the hard way that some people would exploit that hope. "You called my signature mole an insult to cuisine," Camila said quietly. "You filmed yourself spitting it into a napkin. My grandmother saw that clip. She cried for 2 days." Ashley felt something crack inside her, small, brittle, and devastating. Marcus nodded toward the table. "Ryan invited us here. He wanted us to have a chance to speak, to be seen." Yuki stepped forward gently. "He gave us what you never gave any of us, the dignity to explain our side." Camila's eyes softened just slightly. "We aren't here to destroy you. If we wanted that, we would have done it when you did this to us." Ashley shook her head weakly. "I didn't know. I didn't realize I was hurting people like that. I thought—" She stopped. There was no version of the next sentence that wouldn't sound hollow. Ryan finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "This is why I asked them to come. Not to shame you, but because I need you to understand the pattern. You didn't just make a mistake with me. You've been doing this for a long time. And the people you targeted weren't random. Ashley's pulse pounded painfully, I swear. I didn't choose them because of who they were. Marcus's voice was calm, but the tremor beneath it betrayed something deeper. Maybe not consciously, but it happened. Each of us built something from nothing. Each of us represented a voice you didn't treat like a voice at all. Camila stepped closer, her tone softening, surprisingly compassionate. You hurt us. Deeply. But we didn't come here to watch you fall apart. We came because Ryan asked what we wanted most. Ashley looked up through blurred eyes, barely breathing. What? What do you want? Yuki spoke for all three, her tone steady and painfully sincere. For you to stop. Truly stop. To see the harm. And to change. Ashley felt her breath shudder out of her in a broken exhale. She pressed a hand over her mouth to muffle the sound, but the room heard it anyway. She whispered through the tears, voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. Marcus nodded. That's the first honest thing you've said in a long time. Ashley instinctively rose from her chair, panic creeping up her spine. She took a step toward the door, toward escape, toward anything but this unbearable confrontation, but Camila shifted calmly. Not threatening, just present enough to let Ashley know that leaving wasn't the answer. We're not here to trap you, Camila said softly. Just to make sure you don't run before you hear what comes next. Ashley froze, her hands shaking. Ryan spoke last, his voice gentle enough to steady the room. No one here wants revenge. We want accountability. We want healing. And maybe if you're willing to do the work, we want this to be the moment everything changes for you. Ashley closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. For the first time in a long time, she didn't want to run. She wanted to face it. All of it. And the room filled with the people she had wounded felt strangely like the only place in the world where she could finally begin. The room felt different now, less accusatory, less sharp at the edges. Still heavy, yes, but softened by something new, a shift, a willingness. The air carried the quiet tremor of people exhaling after holding their breath for too long. Accountability had entered the space, not as a weapon, but as a long overdue acknowledgement of harm and a possibility of healing. Ashley sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale, shoulders slumped. Days ago, she would have feared the optics of this moment, would have calculated which expression read the most sympathetic, which angle minimized fault. But now she wasn't calculating anything. There was no strategy left inside her, only a messy, fragile sincerity that felt frighteningly new. Ryan leaned back slightly in his chair, watching her with a calm that wasn't indifferent, but grounded, anchoring. Marcus, Yuki, and Camila each held their own posture of quiet readiness, emotionally raw but steady. Alina stood near the wall, hands clasped, watching with a mixture of concern and resolve. And then there was Tommy hovering near the side table, pretending to tidy up water glasses even though his hands were shaking a little. Ashley glanced toward him, unsure why he looked so nervous. Ryan noticed and nodded at Tommy. It's okay. You can explain. Tommy hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. He was young, barely 22, and the earnestness in his expression was almost disarming. A few freckles dotted his nose, and his apron still had a streak of chocolate mousse on it from dessert prep. He was the farthest thing from someone who brought malice into a room, but he did bring truth. He cleared his throat. I've been documenting things. Slee blinked, confused. Documenting what? Everything, he said quietly. For the last 9 months. Her breath caught, not in fear, but in a rising dread that felt strangely earned. Why? She whispered. His face softened with a kind of apologetic courage. Because I volunteer with a food justice nonprofit in Oakland. They help chefs who get targeted by predatory deals, false reviews, influencers who use their platforms to bully restaurants into partnerships they don't want. They told us to keep an eye out. And then I watched what happened to you, Marcus. then Yuki, then Camila. And I realized it wasn't random. He looked down at the floor, ashamed even though he had nothing to be ashamed of. I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof, so I just kept notes. Screenshots, dates, contracts, everything I could find. Ashley felt her shoulders fold inward. The idea that a server, someone she probably wouldn't have even noticed on an ordinary night, had been quietly witnessing the fallout of her actions made her chest ache. Not because she felt exposed, but because she finally grasped how long the ripples of her choices had been touching people she never even considered. Ryan gave Tommy an encouraging nod. "You did the right thing." Tommy let out a shaky breath. "I wasn't sure. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I just kept thinking. If no one says anything, then nothing changes." Ashley pressed her fingers to her mouth, absorbing the words like a wound that needed to be felt before it could heal. "I hurt people," she whispered. "I really hurt people." The silence that followed wasn't punitive. It simply made space for the truth. Elena stepped closer to the table and placed another envelope down, this one thinner, but somehow more intimidating. "This is the joint press release," she said softly. "It's ready whenever you are, Ryan." Ashley's eyes widened. "Press release? About me?" Ryan nodded slowly. "About the pattern. About the harm done. About the need for accountability in influencer culture. About the way minority-owned restaurants are disproportionately targeted. It's not vindictive. It's educational, transparent, collective." Ashley stared at the envelope, her pulse thudding in her ears. "You already wrote it?" "We drafted it," Elena corrected gently. "It's not an attack. No insults. No dragging your name through the mud. Just facts. And a public acknowledgement that the chefs you targeted deserve justice." Ryan folded his hands, his voice low and steady. "We're not asking for revenge. We don't want to ruin you. But silence is how this keeps happening." Ashley nodded slowly, as if every word of his sank deep into the parts of her she had avoided for years. There was something strangely kind about the idea that they had chosen transparency instead of destruction. In a twisted way, it felt like mercy. "Will I get to read it before it's released?" she asked quietly. "Of course," Elena said. "And you can add your own statement if you want, or not. It's your choice." Ashley swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight. "I don't even know what I'd say." "Start with the truth," Yuki suggested softly. "That's all any of us ever wanted from you." For a moment, no one moved. But then Ashley's phone buzzed once, then again, then again. The vibrations grew rapid, almost frantic, rattling against the table like a warning. Ashley winced. I should check that." "Go ahead," Ryan said, though his tone made it clear he already knew what she would find. Ashley lifted the phone with trembling fingers. The screen lit up with a relentless stream of notifications, emails, missed calls, messages. Her sponsorship manager, her agent, brands she had partnered with for years, luxury services, PR coordinators, even fan accounts. She opened the first email, then the second, then the third. Her breath hitched, sponsors pulling out, deals terminated, collaboration offers rescinded, her marketing firm formally withdrawing representation, her upcoming podcast tour put on indefinite hold, a beauty brand citing misalignment of values, a travel company stating concerns regarding public perception. Every single message was a door closing. The phone buzzed, again another sponsor withdrawing support. Ashley's face went pale. "They're cutting ties with me, all of them, in real time." Marcus exhaled softly, not in satisfaction. In understanding, it hits fast. "That's what you never saw from our side," Yuki added gently. "It's not the end. It just feels like it right now." Camila leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Losing everything forces you to face yourself, but it also clears space for something better." Ashley let out a broken laugh, one that wasn't amusement, but disbelief at how completely her world had turned on her in a matter of minutes. I deserve this, she whispered. No, Ryan corrected, voice steady. You deserve accountability, not annihilation. Ashley looked up, eyes red, searching his expression for cruelty and finding none. This isn't punishment, he continued. It's a reset. A moment to start over. Clean. Honest. Real. Her lips quivered. I don't know how to do that. You will, Marcus said quietly. 'Cause tonight you listened. That's the first step. Tommy nodded timidly. And we'll help. Not with your brand or anything like that, but with the humanity part. Ashley laughed again, softer this time, her breath trembling. I think that's the part I lost somewhere along the way. Ryan stood, slowly, giving her space to breathe. Then tonight is the beginning of finding it again. She didn't look away this time. She let herself feel the sting, the loss, the fear, and beneath all of it, something fragile but unmistakably present. Hope. Not a clean or pretty hope. A bruised one. A trembling one. But real. The kind that comes only after truth has finally been spoken aloud. Ryan stayed quiet for a long time after reading the final page of the draft contract. The room had emptied of noise, but not of tension. There was still the faint trembling around Ashley's fingers, the kind that comes when a person senses the cost of their own patterns circling back, demanding payment. She kept swallowing, like her throat couldn't decide if it wanted to close or apologize. He looked at her not with triumph, not with cruelty, but with a tired steadiness that came from too many nights building something from nothing, only to watch someone try to take it. His voice, when it finally came, was softer than the air in the room deserved. I'm not trying to ruin you, Ashley. Her eyes snapped up, red from hours of silence and self-inflicted spirals. It feels like you are, she whispered. He shook his head, rubbing a thumb over the edge of the papers. Destruction is easy. It's lazy. Revenge is indulgent. And I don't want to become what hurt me. He let the words hang there, giving her space to hear herself breathe. But you can't walk away from what you did. Not this time. She flinched, and something in her chest seemed to fold inward. Ryan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You targeted 4 restaurants, 4 chefs, 4 livelihoods. You didn't just give bad reviews. People survive bad reviews. You tried to own them, strip them of their voice and call it partnership. He tapped the contract lightly. So here's the only justice I know that leaves both of us human at the end. He slid the paper toward her. Her eyes scanned the first line. Her breath stilled. Work 3 months unpaid in each restaurant. 1 full year of kitchens she underestimated. Kitchens she humiliated. A year spent learning from the ground. From dish pit to prep line. A year under the people she once reduced to hashtags and metrics. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Ryan continued quietly, or, you can choose the other path. He took a slow breath, not dramatic, simply truthful. Marcus, Yuki, Camila, and I are ready to file. Jointly. Defamation. Interference. Damages. His gaze didn't waver. You know what 4 coordinated lawsuits will do. You won't survive them. Not your business, not your brand, maybe not even your name. Her shoulders curled inward like she was bracing for impact. And before you say I'm threatening, you know, this is me putting the truth on the table and letting you choose which future you want to walk toward. She covered her mouth with one hand, fingers shaking. For once, she didn't look polished or composed or media-trained. She looked human, raw, unbuffered, terrifyingly exposed. My lawyers, she murmured, voice thin as a thread. They said settlement was the only way. That I don't have leverage, She didn't finish. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe saying the rest out loud would make it too real. That for the first time, her influence was useless. Ryan nodded once. They're giving you good advice. Her gaze drifted unfocused, somewhere far away, Maybe through every brand deal slipping through her fingers, every sponsor pulling out, every mistake she thought she was too clever to pay for. She blinked hard, and a single tear slid beneath her mascara, carving a line she didn't bother to wipe. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't. I've never worked in a kitchen like yours. I don't even know where things are kept. I'll mess everything up. I'll drag everyone down." Her voice cracked, brittle with the truth she tried to hide for years. "I'm not good at anything real." Ryan's expression softened in a way that made her flinch again, as if kindness hurt worse than confrontation. "That's the point," he said quietly. "You start where people start. You learned the work behind the plates you mocked. You see the hands that make food possible. And maybe you learned something about yourself along the way." She exhaled shakily, her voice barely audible. "And if I can't? Then you'll try again the next day," he said. "And the next. No shortcuts. No stories. Just work." He pushed the pen toward her. For a long moment she didn't move. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath for her, waiting to see if she'd finally choose accountability instead of escape. If she'd step into something painful, unfamiliar, but real. When she finally reached for the pen, the motion was slow, almost fragile. Her fingers hovered over it before closing, as if touching consequence for the first time in her life. She signed, not dramatically, not defiantly, just quietly, the way a person accepts the truth about themselves. When she set the pen down, her hand lingered on the paper, trembling against her own name. "It's done," she murmured, sounding both terrified and relieved, as if surrendering to gravity after years of fighting it. Ryan nodded, collecting the documents with a steady hand, but not a triumphant one. "You made the right choice," he said softly. Ashley leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, her breath shuddering in her chest, half grief, half release, like a door she'd been holding shut had finally swung open on its own. She whispered, almost to herself, "I don't know who I'll be after this." Ryan looked at her with something close to compassion. Maybe for the first time, someone real. No one applauded. No one gloated. The room held nothing but the quiet weight of a life turning a corner, slow, unsteady, but resolute. Her sentence wasn't ruin. It was the beginning of something painful, humbling, and if she allowed it, something that could change her. A year of kitchens. A year of work. A year of becoming someone who could face her own reflection without flinching. She didn't know if she could do it. But for the first time, she wasn't running. She was stepping forward. The first morning was the one that shattered her illusions. Not the 10th or the 30th. The first. The alarm pierced her darkness at 5 a.m. A sound that felt unholy. Too sharp for a life she had once shaped around leisurely brunches and carefully staged sunlight. Her hand fumbled over the nightstand, almost knocking the phone to the floor. She stared at the glowing numbers as if they were mocking her. 5 o'clock. No filters, no retakes, no curated elegance, just the quiet truth of a choice she had made. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, elbows on her knees, breathing through a nausea that came from dread and something deeper. The awareness that she had never submitted herself to anything she couldn't control. The kitchen did not care about control. It cared about effort. She arrived at Marcus's restaurant, still wearing the ghost of who she used to be. Perfect ponytail, neutral-toned hoodie, shoes too clean for the concrete. He didn't comment on any of it. He simply handed her an apron stiff with starch and pointed to the sink. "Start with the pot from last night," he said. "You'll know which one." She found it immediately. It was the color of midnight and weighed like someone's grudge. Burnt sugar had fused to the bottom and the rim was ringed with a crust only fire understood. She stared at it for several seconds, her palms damp, her pride twitching like a wounded thing. But she lowered it into hot water. Steam climbed her face. Her eyes watered, and her hands soft, uncalloused, felt the first sting of heat. By hour 2, she understood why chefs said kitchens could break you before they rebuilt you. Her fingers reddened. Water sloshed down her sleeves. Her back ached in ways she didn't know backs could ache. Every few minutes a cook passed behind her, calling behind, and she flinched each time, unused to bodies moving in tight spaces with such urgency and purpose. She didn't speak. She didn't know how to. By hour 4, her ponytail had frayed. Her mascara had smudged, her pride had cracked. And somewhere in that quiet fracture, the first thread of humility began to weave itself through her. The montage of her days blurred into a rhythm her old life would have mocked. Sunrise in Oakland. Midnight prep in Berkeley. Afternoon marinating in San Jose. The grind of travel between kitchens, her hands smelling perpetually of garlic, citrus, onions, and dish soap. These were the scents of people she had dismissed. She learned, painfully, that chopping onions was both a skill and an initiation. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not dramatic, but genuine. Her nose running, her breath catching as she blinked rapidly. Yuki had laughed softly, handing her the correct knife grip. "You're crying for reasons that have nothing to do with onions," she said gently. And Ashley had swallowed hard because the truth stung. Burns came next. Not severe, but real thin lines on her forearms, tiny blisters on her fingertips. Camila taught her how to cool them quickly, how to wrap them, how to keep working. "You'll stop fearing the pain," Camila said. "Eventually, you'll stop noticing it. That's when you start understanding." Not once in those first weeks did any of them raise their voice at her. That was almost worse. The quiet patience of people she had hurt felt like a mirror held too close, forcing her to see the sharp edges of her old self reflected back. After the first month, her hands had changed. The skin had thickened. The nails had shortened. The softness had given way to dexterity born not from intention, but from necessity. But the greatest change wasn't in her hands. It was in her voice. She drafted her apology, public, raw, unedited. She filmed it at her kitchen table, hair unstyled, eyes tired, no lighting setup flattening her truth. Her voice shook as she spoke, not because she wanted sympathy, but because she had finally run out of excuses to hide behind. "I hurt people," she said, "not by accident, through choices, through ego, through believing I was entitled to what others built. I'm sorry, not for the consequences, but for the harm. I'm learning, I'm working, and I'm rebuilding myself from the ground up." When she posted it, her follower count plummeted. She watched the numbers free fall in real time, her stomach hollowing with each drop. It felt like losing oxygen, like watching a version of herself dissolve. But then, slowly, quietly, the kind of people she never noticed before began following. Not brand managers, not trend chasers, people who cooked, people who waited tables, people who cared about fairness, people who saw sincerity not as a performance, but as a beginning. Her voice shifted online. She stopped posting polished meals and started posting the reality of burnt omelettes, uneven knife cuts, the days she sliced her thumb and had to redo an entire tray of prep. She posted the history she was learning, Marcus's grandmother's recipes, Yuki's stories of food meant to heal, Camila's family's rituals of celebration. Her brand didn't collapse. It transformed. She stopped centering herself and started centering the chefs she worked under. She filmed interviews with them instead of herself. She used her platform to amplify their menus, their traditions, their struggles. She turned her sponsorship categories upside down, refusing deals that didn't benefit the communities she had once exploited. Every day was hard. Every day was humbling. Every day was a choice to stay when she could have run. And in the quiet moments scrubbing pans long after midnight, wiping down counters, no one was watching her clean. feeling her shoulders ache in that strangely satisfying way that comes only from honest work. She began to understand that redemption wasn't something you earned once. It was something you recommitted to every morning at 5 a.m. And somewhere in the heat of the stoves, the sting of onion tears and the rhythm of learning from those she once diminished, Ashley realized something unexpected. She didn't miss her old life, not the curated perfection, not the influence, not the illusion of power. What she found instead was something steadier, something real, a second chance forged not in forgiveness alone, but in fire. The kitchen felt different that morning. Not quieter kitchens were never quiet, but steadier somehow. The kind of steadiness that came from breath held in unison, from people waiting for something that mattered. Stainless steel counters gleamed under the overheads, steam curled from stock pots, and the familiar rhythm of chopping, whisking, and simmering pulsed like a heartbeat through the room. Ashley stood at her station, fingers pressed lightly to the edge of the cutting board, grounding herself the way Marcus had taught her. Her hands were no longer the trembling, manicured hands she had walked in with months before. They were firmer now, steadier, shaped by heat and repetition and a humility she could no longer fake. Pale scars crossed her knuckles, small, almost delicate reminders of every mistake that had built her. Today, she was cooking for the four of them: Marcus, Yuki, Camila, and Ryan. Her stomach fluttered as she glanced at the ingredients she had laid out. Everything was organized with the sort of gentle care she once thought beneath her: parsley stems lined in perfect rows, scallops patted dry, citrus segments waiting in chilled ramekins, broth simmering low and fragrant behind her. Respect in culinary form. The dishes she had planned were not flashy, not the influencer-styled plates she used to post online with dramatic swirling captions and curated angles. These were grounded plates, rooted in the stories she had learned, the culture she had stepped into with clumsy feet and open palms. She cooked Marcus's dish first, a soulful, deeply seasoned medley inspired by Oakland traditions, but with her own touch of restraint. Her hands moved almost automatically as she plated, every motion a quiet thank you. She tasted the final spoonful before sending it to the four chefs waiting in the private dining room. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with hope. Next came Yuki's dish, delicate and balanced, every flavor clear, every movement intentional. She remembered how many nights she had cried chopping onions, learning the fragile dance between salt and acid, between boldness and subtlety. Yuki's lessons lived in her fingertips now. Camila's dish followed, vibrant and warm, each element layered with emotion and generosity. Camila had once said that food was a hug you could taste. Ashley had never understood that before. Now, as she brushed the final glaze onto the plate, she felt the truth of it all the way to her ribs. Finally came the last dish, the one that haunted her, the one she had once refused to taste. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself as she reached for the scallops. They sizzled the moment they touched the pan-golden edges, forming with the same crisp sound she had memorized from Ryan's demonstrations. Her heart pounded in her throat. She built the dish exactly as he had taught her, then gently wove into it the lessons from the others: a broth technique from Yuki, a spice nuance from Marcus, a brightness inspired by Camila, a fusion not born of appropriation, but of gratitude. A reimagining not to surpass him, but to honor what he had given her. The last swirl of truffle foam crowned the plate like a whisper. She stared at it, her breath shaking, a lump rising in her throat. This was the dish she had mocked. The dish she had weaponized. The dish that had broken her and rebuilt her. She carried it to Ryan herself. The dining room fell silent the moment she entered. The four chefs watched her with expressions she couldn't quite read: soft pride, quiet expectation, a hint of nostalgia. She placed the plate in front of Ryan with both hands, the way he had taught her to treat food as something alive, something worthy of reverence. Ryan studied it for a long moment before taking his first bite. He closed his eyes. The room held its breath. Then he looked up at her, a slow, genuine smile blooming across his face, one she had never seen from him before, warm enough to cut clean through her composure. "Now you understand why we do this," he said softly. Her chest throbbed. She swallowed hard, unable to speak past the pressure in her throat. She nodded instead, eyes glistening, because she did understand. Finally. 6 months passed. The Vine Collective had a 3-month waitlist. Now, something Ashley still found surreal whenever she stepped onto the floor and saw guests whisper excitedly as plates passed. But no one whispered about her anymore, and she preferred it that way. She wasn't treated differently. She wasn't given shortcuts. She wasn't praised for existing. She was simply a junior chef. 2 stations a week. Prep when assigned. Cleanup always. No special treatment. Some days she still struggled. Some days her cuts were uneven, or her sauces broke, or her timing slipped. But each time, the chefs corrected her with calm, firm guidance. They no longer treated her as someone dangerous, just someone learning. One busy Friday afternoon, a school group was touring the restaurant. The kids crowded near the kitchen doors, peeking in with wide eyes. One boy in particular, a young black teen with shy shoulders and a spark of wonder, stood at the edge of the group, trying to guess how the kitchen choreography worked. Ryan noticed him. He wiped his hands on his apron, approached the boy, and knelt so their eyes were level. "One day, this could be you," he said gently. The boy's face lit up in a way Ashley felt in her bones. She stood at the pass, expediting tickets beside Ryan, and something inside her broke open in the quietest, most tender way. A warmth spread through her chest, both painful and cleansing, as if someone had unlocked a door she didn't know she'd been keeping shut. This feeling was what she had almost destroyed. Not the restaurants, not the reputations, but the possibility, the hope, the invitation to become something more than what the world expected. She blinked rapidly, swallowing the emotion gathering in her throat as the printers clicked and the kitchen roared back to life. Ryan turned back to the stove, plating the signature scallop dish, now the most requested item on both coasts. His movements were precise, elegant, almost meditative. Ashley handed him the next ticket without a word. No longer an influencer. No longer the villain. Not yet a master. Just a cook. A worker among workers. A person earning her place, one plate, one burn, one humbled breath at a time. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more.